All right, so again, we've sort of gone into very different terrain from what we've been driving over for the past 45 minutes. So this is Texas Hill Country, and what we're in is something called the Edwards Plateau. And again, if you look at the physiographic map that's in your little guidebooks, we're right on the border of, and we're about to drive into an area called the Llano Uplift. And what we're seeing out here, you can sort of get an idea of why it's called the Edwards Plateau. So a plateau is a region of relatively high topography that is very uniform in elevation, so it's basically high and flat. So again, up here in central Texas, we have this pronounced topographic step, and then it flattens out considerably up here. And you can tell that from if you were looking around as we were driving, you can often see exposures of the Edwards limestone and other sedimentary units, and they're very flat lying. There isn't a lot of tilting. Although sometimes you see down into older Paleozoic sediments that are preserved up here, and they are considerably tilted. But in terms of the more recent geologic history, nothing has been moved around very much. So that's where we are in terms of the broader Texas geography. And then where we're standing right near here is a place called Slaughter Gap. And the key thing to note is the rocks that you are standing on and are directly behind you. So if you were to characterize the type of rock that you are standing on or sitting on, what type of rock is this in terms of our three main categories? Who thinks igneous? Who's actually bothered to look? Some of you, good. So some igneous. Who thinks that they're standing on sedimentary rock? Anybody? Any takers? How about metamorphic rock? Anyone? Anyone? No? Okay. Yes, you are standing on igneous rock. So everyone should get down on the knees. Quickly, come on, everyone. And look at the rock. Okay, so we're actually looking at real rocks now, something many of you haven't done yet. And so a couple of things to notice is that in terms of the texture, would you describe this as a fine-grained rock or a coarse-grained rock? Coarse-grained, yeah. You can see all the individual minerals. Some of them are rather big. So we've got one part of our definitions down. So now thinking about the mineralogy, are these light or dark-colored minerals? There's a lot of lichen here, so be careful. What about the minerals? What color are they? A lot of pink. Okay, that's good. Those are feldspars, probably potassium feldspar. There's some white crystals that are probably plagioclase. And then there's some clear things that are quartz. And then there's probably a bit of biotite and or hornblende in there as well. Probably some biotite. So what you're standing on is what type of rock? Granite. Okay, some of you read the actual documentation that I handed out. Great. We are standing on a formation called the Town Mountain Granite. And this is one of the oldest rocks in Texas, although not by far any of the oldest rocks in the world. But nonetheless, this thing is about 1.1 billion years old. And we'll talk more about its genesis at our next stop. But so we're looking at Precambrian, sort of middle Proterozoic, igneous rocks, tectonic rocks. So these were intruded and crystallized deep within the earth because of this nice coarse texture that tells us things move slowly. Alright, so that's what we're standing on. What about all these blocks? These are a little bit jumbled behind you. So everyone should now jump up, run, and look at those rocks. Or just turn around if we're standing right in front of one. And you can see them nicely exposed across the valley here too, as well on the adjacent hill. So how are these rocks different than what you're standing on? What's one important characteristic in which they're different? They're layered, right? These sands have very definite layering, so that's one thing. So if you look at the rock itself up close, what do you see in terms of its texture? Can you see it? What does it look like? How big are the particles that make up that rock? Some people are saying sand. Anybody got anything bigger than sand? So bigger than 2 millimeters? So some people are saying they're gravel-sized particles, okay? Good. So what type of rock is this? We're describing it in terms of sand and gravel. Is this an igneous rock again? No. What kind of rock is it? Metamorphic, right. No, sedimentary. So we're now dealing with a sedimentary rock. People said it's got sort of sand to gravel-sized particles, so we're looking at sandstone or maybe a pebble conglomerate, depending on what layer you're looking at. It's got nice bending. As we look across, these blocks have been moved slightly, so they're no longer in their original orientation, but if we look across the valley, we can see that again we've got this nice horizontal layering. So this is what's called the Hickory Sandstone. This is Cambrian in age, so this is at the beginning of the Phanerozoic. It's about 540 million years old, and it's now a sedimentary rock. So if we assume that the lower part of that hill across the way is also Hound Mountain granite, what's the contact? What's the nature of the contact between these sandstones and the granite? What's the general term we would use to describe that contact? An unconformity, right. And more specifically, what type of unconformity? Anybody remember their types of unconformities? Non-conformity, good. Yes. This is a non-conformity, and that's when you're depositing sedimentary volcanic rocks on top of plutonic or metamorphic rocks, things that were deeply buried, and you had to strip away a lot of material. So these rocks that we're standing on tell an interesting story. So there's a magmatic body here. It's deep inside the earth. We had to erode tens or up to 10 kilometers, maybe a bit more, of material away over that 500 million year period, and then we started depositing stuff on top. The Hickory Sandstone is also interesting in that you find correlative units all the way from Mexico through Canada, all along the western portion of North America. And this unconformity between these Precambrian basement rocks and these Cambrian sandstones, which again you find throughout the entire western North America, is called the Great Unconformity. You see it at the base of the Grand Canyon, you see it in Montana, you see it in British Columbia, here, northern Mexico. So there's the whole western coast of North America was sort of beveled off. It was an erosion, it was a relatively horizontal erosional surface 600 million years ago, and then it changed about 500 million years ago, and we started slowly depositing layers on top of it. And there's been a lot of other things that have happened since then, depending on where you are, but this unconformity is very consistent across all of western North America. So it's a very interesting feature that way. So more locally, one thing, people have actually gone around and in very high resolution mapped out where this unconformity is across this landscape. And what you actually see, if you look at this, if you're able to measure very precisely where this unconformity is, you can actually map out the paleotopography. So, 550 million years ago, there were little hills and valleys. So there was some topography, it wasn't perfectly flat, and then this sandstone came in and slowly buried all of that. But by mapping out exactly where that unconformity is, you can actually document what that paleotopography looked like. Alright, let's look at the sandstone one more time. Try to look at the individual grains that are making it up. What are those grains made of? Again, look at the rock. You have to look at the rock to do this. You have to be close. Binoculars don't work. The zoom lens on your camera does not work. So what are the grains that are making up that sandstone and pebble conglomerate? What color are they? Let's describe, are they angular or rounded? Angular. Alright, so we're getting some textural descriptions now. We've got an angular clasts. What about the color? Are these all quartz grains, or are there some other things in there?
It's mostly quartz.
Mostly quartz, okay, is there anything else? Any pink grains in there? Okay, lots of pink grains. Those aren't quartz, those are your feldspar. So we've got angular grains, we've got feldspar and quartz. So this is what would be called an arkose, because it's got a significant component of feldspar in it. And what does that tell you about how far this material was transported before it was deposited? Far or near?
Near.
Near. Right, so we've got feldspar, we've got quartz. It hasn't moved very far. What is the rock made of that you're standing on? Feldspar and quartz. So these sandstones were not transported far. They're locally derived. They're from erosion of the of probably equivalent granite bodies nearby, and that sediment was then deposited relatively close and just sort of filled in the topography. So again, we can look at the textural relationships and see, and the mineralogical relationships, and see that these sands were coming directly from central Texas. They weren't transported from, say, the Appalachian Mountains or some other far-traveled source. They were coming from right around here and then filling in the topography.